Take a look at this soil. It's very sandy. It's a good spot to talk about the nitrogen cycle. Nitrogen is also, just like carbon, an important element in life for living things. Nitrogen is a component of DNA, nitrogenous bases, right? It's also a component of protein, which is extremely important. So the nitrogen cycle is another matter cycle that we really need to concentrate on and think about. So one of the limiting factors for primary productivity in an ecosystem, one of the two main ones in terms of nutrients, is nitrogen, the other being phosphorus. Nitrogen is extremely important, however, and there's often a lot of nitrogen in the soil, except not in a place like this. I am at the Jersey Shore, yeah. And no, that show had, never mind. Horrible. Horrible. But sandy soil often can be replaced with non-sandy soil, which has more nutrients in it if you have a lot of plant matter that can live there. But the problem is, when it's like this, there's not much nitrogen. There are other problems. We could talk about porosity and water retention, water infiltration, and all that. But a lot of deciduous trees in this area anyway cannot deal with this type of soil. And part of the problem is they don't get enough nitrogen. Now, there are some symbiotic relationships that help legumes and even some coniferous trees deal well with sandy soils. Like mycorrhizae are not involved in nitrogen fixation. However, indirectly they can help to improve soil quality in a way that doesn't help the deciduous trees as much, but can aid the coniferous trees living there. But anyway, we're going to go more into what nitrogen, how nitrogen gets into plants, and what really helps this whole cycle run. So the atmosphere around me and up there and everywhere is full of nitrogen, but the nitrogen is in the form of N2. And plants can't use that. And that's a problem. So if they really can't use that directly, how are they going to get all of that nitrogen? It has to be through some help, really. And one means of that help would be rhizobium bacteria, which are involved in nitrogen fixation. So with nitrogen fixation, you're taking that atmospheric nitrogen out of the atmosphere and putting it into a form that plants can actually use. So bacteria like that and are essential in, we talk about succession and how that gets going and how eventually you're going to add some more organic matter, which is going to generate more nitrogen in the soil. But getting to that point, legumes and plants that can grow in nitrogen poor conditions, they're aided by these symbiotic relationships on their roots. So whether nitrogen fixation occurs biotically with the organisms, prokaryotes that we've been talking about, or through abiotic conditions and lightning, it would be what I'm talking about. It's going to convert that N2 into ammonia and ammonium ions that plants can actually use. Then there's nitrification. And so we take that ammonia and we're going to turn it into nitrite and then nitrate. And there are two sets of prokaryotes that are involved in this. And even we can even generate a small amount of energy, or those prokaryotes can. doing these processes. But at the end, that nitrate is usable by plants as well. So this is also extremely important. There are also archaea, not just bacteria, that are involved. And most of the time we're talking about an aerobic process when we're talking about nitrification, although we could talk about ammonox, but not really going to get into that. There's also ammonification, where you have decomposers that will turn living tissue and urine and different things into, and there's some ammonia already there, but into ammonia and ammonium ions, which are useful for plants directly as well. And then there's also bacteria that will, since we're talking about cycle, right, engage in denitrification and turn that back into atmospheric N2. So how do we impact this as humans? Let's talk about that. So what have we done to this process? Well, we add nitrogen to the atmosphere with burning fossil fuels and other industrial processes. And we can cause air pollution through some of that. And in the air pollution section of AP Environmental Science, that's part of what we talk about. We could talk about influences on the ocean and water bodies. We could talk about toxic, harmful algal blooms. So they can be detrimental, of course. We could take, those and wind up with less oxygen to no oxygen in the water, and that obviously the dissolved oxygen is necessary for life in the water. So that's a problem. We add fertilizer to soil in trying to make it more productive, but that's always short term. And as we do that, we do influence the nitrogen cycle as well temporarily. And that can be problematic because it doesn't long term add structure to the soil or really nutrients that stay around. It just adds it for the moment, and a lot of those can run off into water bodies, for example, and culture eutrophication is a real problem.